morning and welcome to Coffee with the Pastors. I hope that you have your coffee cup here. Mine is kind of small this morning. I don't know what that is about, but anyway, this is our chance to get together and have some time to just have casual conversation as pastors and invite you to listen in on what's going on. It's been our tradition to kind of give everybody the inside scoop of what's happening. And so this one's coming a little later to folks in May, but we've had a lot going on at Trinity this month. I had somebody come up to me on Sunday and say, "We're back." And I went, "Well, are we? Are we back? Yeah, kind of, some things, maybe, somehow." So yeah, it feels like this has been a strange month in terms of taking some steps forward and evaluating and where we're going with all of that. So I don't know how you, Pastor Dan or Pastor Kevin, are feeling about that, but it's an interesting dynamic that's been going on this month.
Yeah, it feels to me like just life in general has gone from like a nice steady cruise of like 50 miles an hour to like 90 miles an hour. And not just in church stuff, certainly here, things have really picked up speed. But just in life in general, as things open up and as opportunities become available and some things that we had set aside because we couldn't do them are starting up again, it feels like a little bit of a whiplash going on. And I don't know if I'm the only one that's feeling that way, but things have really picked up speed here. And I think on top of that, trying to figure out in the midst of all of this, how to do things still not back in a fully normal situation, still kind of in the waning days of the pandemic. I mean, that all takes extra time and energy and thought and emotional energy and all those things too. So I think, that's what it feels like for me in my own personal life. And I think it feels that way at church too, still kind of, yeah, we're doing more. We have some more people around, and yet it's not back to what it was before the pandemic. I don't think anybody would say that. Right. So it is a weird place to be in some ways.
Yeah, I think it was a good step, our outdoor worship. It was good to be back outside. It was good to preach and see people's faces and reactions. Although that was a little unnerving after more than a year, but it was good. I feel like my summer has just gotten packed between my family obligations and, with two families trying to squeeze in vacations that we didn't get last year. And so it's like twice as much stuff for us to do. Plus, you guys have been doing the same kind of thing and just kind of navigating the when can I be away? When do I need to be at church and available? And it's like all of a sudden the summer, which is generally kind of a little bit slower pace, now feels way more packed. And yeah, I'm already anxious about the fall. In part though, because it is trickling back. I mean, as fast as it feels, there's other places where it feels like it's still trickling, right? I mean, not everybody's comfortable coming back in person. And not, our meetings now are having to be hybrid because some people want to be in person, some people want to be on Zoom, and it's kind of trying to figure out that whole thing. It's still you're still creating and inventing as we go along, which we've been doing for over a year now. Just almost every month we have to reinvent who we are and how we're being church together.
Yeah, it feels like, when the pandemic first hit, it was a bumpy ride to figure out how not to do things the way we always had. And now it feels like we're in the midst of another bumpy ride, because yeah, we're doing things, but we're not doing things. And even just personally, I work from home, I work at the church, I'm going back and forth, and then I'm going, is that there? Is that here? Where? Whereas, it was at the church, then it all moved home, and it's been at home, and now once again, it's this transition. I read somebody talking about this is not the end of the pandemic. This is the beginning of the ending, and I thought that's helpful language for me to think about it, because this ending of the pandemic and how we move into whatever is next is not going to be a line in the sand. It's going to be a long period of time, and it feels like we're at the beginning of another long period of time of transition to whatever.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're back, but are we going to be back the way we were before? I don't know. Which I think is, part of where the energy goes, right? Not only for myself, but I think for our staff too, just trying to take some time in the midst of packing everything else in this summer to be intentionally focused on, so what is the next steps and what does make sense as we move into this new era that the Holy Spirit is blowing us into.
I do think, in any time of transition, right, taking time to intentionally reflect on what's going on is really crucial. It's also probably one of the hardest things to do because you're so overwhelmed. A lot of times we're just feeling like you're just kind of head down, I'm going to get through this transition to what's coming. It's been a lesson that's taken me a long time to learn, because it's never come naturally to me. But I think for everybody right now is a great time to really be reflecting on what things matter in your life, what things anchor you, what things you've learned over the last year that you don't want to forget, that you don't want to leave behind, and what pieces honestly do you want to leave behind, right? Like, I'm done with that. I want to put that away, but even that's something that can be reflected on. And I just think there's so much power in that, and it's such an opportunity that we have in our lifetimes right now because of the size and the scope of what we've experienced to do that. And I think that's important for individuals. I think it'll be important for people who are connected to faith communities to really think about what is their connection, what does that matter for them. And I think we're going to live that out in a lot of ways as we watch this continuing transition unfold, the people who come back, the people who maybe don't right away for all kinds of reasons, people that have connected virtually and are going to continue to connect that way. I think there's a lot of pieces of that. And we as a staff too, right? Like, we're doing this in some really intentional ways as a staff. We're thinking about this last year, taking some intentional time off of our daily duties to do this so that we can come back together this fall and do some strategy work, do some further group processing around that as we figure out what this place that the Spirit is blowing us to, as you so beautifully put, Pastor Kathy. So that's something I think our people should know about too, that we as an organization, and particularly as a staff, are being really intentional about that, because this is a really unique time, and it's going to take some thoughtfulness and some intentional processing.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really old Christian model of action and then reflection. And I know that the seminaries generally are built on that kind of a model where you go out and you do, or you study, but then you do action, but then you come back and you talk about it and reflect together as a community on how did that go? What was your experience? And I know that that's one of the things I've appreciated a lot about being on this staff is the three of us will every so often take an afternoon and just sit and reflect on what's been happening, what direction are we being called to go in, and how do we, what are the steps towards that? And I think it's great to ask our whole staff to be able to take some time to intentionally think about that, so that when we get back together in the fall, we can actually talk together and say, what was your reflection on this experience, and where do you feel we're being called, and what direction? So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I think my entire entire ministry career, you know, and annual reviews, whether it was hospice or Trinity, I've often ended up saying, you know, if I had time to think about my job, I'd do my job better. And that's the whole point, right? Is that we get so focused in on doing the job that we don't take the step back to think about, you know, what are the important things to be about, and why, and for whom. So yeah, all good questions. And like you're saying, that it's not just about the pastors, but it's also about our staff, and taking care of what we have, a great staff, and I would say a changing staff. So maybe Pastor Dan, do you want to say something about some of the changes that are going on with our staff?
Yeah, we're in the midst of a number of position searches right now. Some of those because of retirements on staff that are coming, like Jane Wagaman, who's going to be retiring here at the end of June. We've been lifting that up a couple different ways, but we're in the midst of of searching actually 2 positions for her role in a process of reflection and thinking strategically about that role. We determined that it was going to be best for our future to take what had been the traditional communications role and split that into a couple of pieces, basically a digital communications kind of main role that holds the vision, the brand, if you will, for our communications at Trinity, and then taking aside a pretty time intensive piece out of that role that's involved in editing and writing our monthly newsletter, The Connections, and then our annual report at the end of the year. And so we're really excited that we extended a job offer to Michelle Murray, a Trinity member. Michelle Murray, known in the community for her writing with the Globe Gazette and for teaching at NIAC, really highly qualified, really gifted person who knows the church well, that has stepped into that connections writer editor role, that newsletter role for us. So really excited to welcome Michelle to the staff. And then the other piece of that role, of Jane's role, the main full-time digital piece, we're in the midst of a search, and we have a large number of applicants. I want to say we're up to, I don't even want to say, it's a lot. We have a lot of applicants, and actually this week, we're looking at some of the finalists for that. We're beginning to line up interviews for that role. And so that's really exciting too, to be talking with some of those people and hoping to bring somebody in on board here in the month of June so that we can begin working them in and doing a little overlap with Jane on that role. So that's exciting. Our custodian position that had opened up last year, and then we kind of left it vacant for a while because we were closed down as a building and just didn't have the need for it. We have filled that role as well. David Smith is a new member of our staff, and excited to invite him or welcome him to the staff team here just this past couple of weeks. And then the other position that's currently open and searching is the one that Kevin's working on with that search team.
Yeah, and actually that too has split into 2 positions. I told somebody it's an indication that the staff has been over functioning on behalf of the congregation for a while, that we lose 2 full-time people and end up making 4 positions, not all of them full-time, of course, but it also allows us to expand some ministry in some ways. So one of the things we're doing with the youth director's job is actually making one director of high school and young adult ministry. So they'll be focused on 9th through 12th grade, but then also young adults in their 20s, in particular, the people who stay for NIAC or to get a job. But also now we know that it's easy to maintain relationships long distance on Zoom. And we think there's some opportunities to grow a young adult ministry even when folks go away to go to college. And that's been a place where at least traditionally or recently, we have not had a lot of programming in focus or anything like that. And we're actually in the midst of interviewing. We've discovered that there is not a large glut of people who want to do youth ministry work right now. So we have not been blessed with a plethora of candidates. We have been blessed with some really, really well-qualified candidates, though. We're just excited about the possibilities. And so we're in the midst of some interviews, and we'll be looking at bringing someone on this summer in that position. And then we're also looking to cover a small 10-hour-a-week kind of a job working with middle school ministries. We haven't posted that job yet, but will be soon. And so if anybody knows of someone in the area or in the congregation that likes to work with middle school kids, especially around confirmation and 5th and 6th graders, again, we're able to grow in that area, and that's largely going to be thanks to a gift from a family in the congregation. They're going to sponsor that position for many years until we kind of grow into that budget-wise. But I'm very excited about that possibility too, is to kind of be more intentional around kind of that 5th, 6th grade years, but then also have some continued good ministry for middle school confirmation age. So yeah, there'll be some changes here this summer, some additions and some changes just in the way we focus and do youth ministry. So
yeah, those are Jane and Marcy retiring. Those are some big shoes to fill, but at the same time, it really is kind of exciting how it is providing this opportunity to grow ministry.
yeah,
And yeah, especially I think about the youth one, and how sometimes we're just, once they graduate from high school, so many kids go to Nyack, but I don't see them. And I think, not until I find out, that they've been in town for these 2 years, and I go, oh, I didn't realize it. I thought you'd gone away to school. So I think this could be really very cool to see that incorporate high school and college. And of course, in the virtual world, they could be going to school anywhere and connecting too.
Yeah,
so
I think maintaining those relationships that you build during those high school years is really valuable. And I think it's also valuable for younger kids as they look and they start to see, oh, that's what faith looks like in my next stage of life. In your high school, you can look and say, oh, there is a place for faith, when I'm in college, when I'm in my early 20s. The junior high kids look at the high school kids and say, oh, that's what faith looks like in the next place I'm headed. So I think it's a great way to build youth ministry is to focus on those, because then you're always kind of looking and pointing up to the next level. But yep. So, and we still have, the great stuff we've been doing. We're having VBS again this summer. We had a VBS in a bag last year when Riverside Bible Camp did not have camp and was not sending out for day camps, but they are again this year. One of the things that happened with the pandemic last year and not having camp is that they weren't able to recruit new counselors last year. So then more of them aged out this year, which meant that there was just a greater need to recruit more counselors and people. And they were a little short-staffed this year. So what they have decided to do is, instead of canceling day camps, that they're just going to be 2 days long. And we were sad to hear that, but at the same time, happy to hear that we were going to get something. So I think it's June 16th and 17th. It's a Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to have counselors here for our day camp, which is elementary school. And then we tag in our VBS for our preschool at the same time. Registration is going on now. You can register online. If you have grandkids that would like to come and be a part of that, we encourage that. Again, register them online, or you can call the church office and Luann or someone can help you get them registered. So, it's great to have the energy of the counselors to come and lead songs and worship and games and crafts and Bible studies, and the kids just love it. We're glad to have that back. And we're glad to have the brand new space that we have. And rooms now that are air conditioned that never have been before, that we can use if it's muggy and hot. So it's really, really good opportunity. So that's coming up in June. I know there's some other big events coming up in June as far as the larger church is concerned. The Synod Assembly is on June 12th. So I don't know if Pastor Dan, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Synod Assembly is going to be June 12th. It'll be the first assembly we've had in a couple of years. We weren't able to have an assembly last summer, which was particularly significant for our synod because it was last summer was scheduled to be a bishop's election, and the first election of a bishop in the Northeast Iowa synod in 25 years. So really important assembly coming up on June 12th for us. It's going to be a virtual assembly. It's going to happen fully online. Voting members will be able to interact and vote electronically from their homes or wherever they get online. And the cool part of it, though, is that because it's going to be fully online, it's going to be available for anyone to watch it live as it happens. And so people will be able to go on the Synod's Facebook page and be able to watch the assembly happen, much like they do for our worship services on our Facebook page. It's just that this will be on the Synod page. And so we'll have more details about that here in the newsletter for June, here coming out the beginning of June. And so people can find out about that. And our voting members, Trinity, because of our membership, we're able to take 6 adult voting members. And so we are taking Cliff Rossler and Matt Rossler, Roger Schlitter, Mary Charlson, Liz Fitzgerald, and Hope Johnson are going to be our 6 voting members. And so they're going to be voting on that bishop's election. And the bishop's election, you know, if people, it's kind of a unique thing, the way that our synod goes about electing a bishop. It varies a little bit, the method for that from synod to synod. Our synod uses an ecclesiastical ballot, which basically means that you start with a clean sheet of paper. And the first round of voting happens when voting members write down one name, the name of any member of the ELCA roster. Any pastor or diaconal person, deacon, can be nominated to be bishop. And then you go from there, and you have to hit a certain percentage of votes of the total for a particular candidate for it to end. It can go up to 5 rounds where you're getting down to just 2 candidates. So you have to have a majority by that last round, but it can end sooner than that if you get a large enough majority on a certain name. So it's a wide open process. You know, it's the kind of process that I think people either love or they really don't like because it is so open-ended. It is so unplanned. And I think there's been a lot of discussion in our synod, like there is always when these elections happen in synods, about the best way to go about electing a bishop. But I, for one, always trust that in the end, the Holy Spirit moves if people are discerning and are faithful to that, and that we will end up with the right person as our next bishop here in Northeast Iowa. So that's exciting and something definitely to keep an eye on here in the next few weeks.
Definitely a historic synod assembly, if you will. I mean, because it has been so long since we've had a change in bishop, and we know that we will have a change in bishop, and then you put it on virtual, you know. So yeah, there's a lot that will happen there. But yeah, I mean, it is the season of Pentecost, right? And that's what I always think about with that kind of a ballot, is that, you know, this is how we truly trust that it's not about us, that it is about the movement of the Spirit. And you sometimes just are totally blown away by the direction that the Holy Spirit moves unexpectedly, but that's the nature of it all. So yeah.
Well, and one kind of addendum to that, one exciting piece of news that goes with that is that Trinity has been invited to host the bishop's installation service here. which is really exciting. And we haven't had one in our Synod again for 2.5 decades, but I'm pretty sure it's never been held at Trinity. So that's really exciting. It sounds like it will involve the presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton. It's going to be a blowout service. It'll be really fun. And that's coming the last Saturday of September. We'll talk more about that as we get a little bit closer to it. But a group of folks here at Trinity are already beginning to plan and work with our interim bishop and some of the Synod staff on that. And once the new bishop is elected, they'll begin working with that person on that installation service. So really exciting and should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm on that committee, and just I was looking at the ELCA has a webpage that's just devoted to installing bishops, and the number of downloadable PDFs around all of it was crazy. I was like, oh, what have I gotten myself in? I thought, oh, we're planning a worship service. This will be nice. Oh.
There's a whole playbook. In fact, it's sitting on my desk behind me in the paper form. It's a whole folder that arrived priority mail from Chicago. So yes, I agree. What did we say? No, it should be really fun though. And I think a chance for some of the gifts in our own congregation too to be used, along with some from around the Synod. I think it'll be a really cool event this fall.
Well, that 90-mile-an-hour pace is probably not going to slow down this fall, is it? With the installation and then also the 150th anniversary. So, yeah, we'll just we'll keep doing, and which makes me think I want to circle back to something that you said, Pastor Dan, in the midst of all of this going on and the transition and the pace of all of that, the importance of asking ourselves questions, of reflection time. And one of the questions you said is what things anchor you? And I wrote that down, and I thought that's such a great question, and I don't know that we're prepared to answer it. It sounds a little reflective of spiritual practices, which when somebody asks me about that, I kind of go because in contrast to the way that I was raised, you should get up early in the morning and you should read your Bible and you should read a particular devotional. I'm all over the board, and I do different things different times, but I don't do anything consistently. So I'm gonna throw it out to you, either one of you, but so that I'll have time to think about it. But what is it that anchors you? Got any off the top of your head thoughts?
Well, I think about spiritual practices a lot. Like I think about physical workouts, and that for me, it's helpful to keep it changing. If I do anything too long, I will just quit doing it because I get bored with it, or because it just doesn't feel as exciting as it did. So I think there's a lot of similarities there for me. Just like I've got to kind of change up whatever I'm doing to try to get some physical exercise. I change up what I'm doing spiritual practice wise, depending on what's going on and the season of life and all those kind of things. For me right now, actually a practice that has come out of the pandemic when I was working from home each day, one of the changes that happened for me was not being in a rush to get to the office by a certain time meant I would come downstairs and I would grab my cup of coffee at home, and I would go sit in a room in our house that has a large window that looks out toward the trees. And I started reading every morning. And I would do two types of reading. One was a devotional that was a bunch of writings by, I guess you'd say, well-known Christian authors or well-known kind of spiritual mentors of the past that are put into collections for different seasons. I did one for Advent and Christmas, and then took a little break during Epiphany, and then I've been doing one for Lent and Easter now. And so that's one of my readings, is one of those writings. And they're the kind of writings that you can read probably at least once or twice a year and find new things in them, because they're really deep and just excellent pieces, classic kind of pieces. So I do that. And then I spend some time staring out the window. So I don't know if staring into space is a spiritual practice, but I have found that to be enormously helpful as I'm starting my day to not, because I'm often so task driven, as you guys both know. I'm so about doing things and getting stuff done that for me, taking time to just stare and be is actually, and that sometimes leads to prayer for me, sometimes in more formal ways, and sometimes it's almost like a bit of a meditation time for me. But I just try to take at least 5-10 minutes and not do anything and just look and just let my mind wander. And that's been a really healthy thing for me. So that's kind of my practice right now, I guess, if I had to describe it.
Well, it reminds me, the one thing that I do consistently do, especially this time of year and in the summer, is what I call pray the waterfall. You don't read that in a book, but our house sits right on top of the waterfall that you can see from State Street on that cliff. And we have a janky chain link fence that keeps people from plummeting to their death off the cliff. But when about a year after we moved in here, I talked Kirk into putting a gate at the one end where there is a part of the cliff that juts out. And I have one of the old Trinity stone benches when we redid the courtyard that sits out there on this little jutting piece there. And I go out there and I sit out there and I pray the waterfall, which is I sit out there and, like you said, stare into space. I look at the waterfall, I listen to the water. Sometimes it leads to prayer. Sometimes I bring a devotional out there. Sometimes, I'll just, do my centering prayer out there. But yeah, there's just something about being in nature that I think I find very enriching.
Yeah, that's awesome. Woods and water, right? They're healing, woods and water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said something about change, because I'm the same way. I mean, I can do something for a while, but then all of a sudden it just kind of stops carrying any water for me, or any kind of. So it's then looking for something else. For me, the consistent pieces have been I get up in the morning and after breakfast, sit down to read or write. And I go through spells where the writing for me is the important piece. And then right now I'm in a spell, and it might last a year or two when I say a spell. Reading has been the thing for the last couple of years. And I usually try to read something that challenges me, that gets me to think and see stuff differently. And then I like to take a walk. And that helps digest stuff. I think the physical activity, a lot of times I'll be like thinking about a sermon or, doing that reflecting piece while I walk. And I'm just concerned that the people who see me walk or that walk near me think I'm just a loon because I'm talking out loud, kind of mumbling to myself, listening to what I say as I do that. And then I've been trying, this is the hard part for me, is to set aside some time to do centering prayer, just to set a timer for like 20 minutes and just do that centering prayer, focusing, kind of a meditation where I'm not doing something, but I'm just being, and just kind of focusing and practicing on the focus, and not letting my mind wander. Or when it does, just go, okay, just remember you were just sitting here. That's all you were doing. You weren't trying to solve all the world's problems. And I think for me, another piece is be any kind of creative outlet. Woodworking, wood carving for me is a big one. Sometimes painting, sometimes, just doing things that don't take a lot of mental focus all the time. I mean, when I'm chainsaw carving, I want to focus. I don't want to be thinking somewhere else, but that kind of creativity really grounds me. So like the time I've got a reflection week coming up in May here. or the first part of June. I'm going to actually go to Iwalu, and they've asked me to come and do some chainsaw carvings out in the woods of wood spirits and animals on some trees that have died. And I'm excited beyond words to go and spend 3 or 4 days. In fact, went and bought a brand new chainsaw specifically for this carving. And I can't tell you how excited I am to spend some days in the woods being creative like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say creativity, because one of the things that I've been doing during the pandemic is, I'll do some reading and there'll be a phrase that will catch my attention. And typically I would just go, oh, that's interesting, and then go off. But I bought a sketchbook and I write the phrase on a blank piece of paper. And sometimes I will be drawn to it and spend some time with it, but not always. But now I've been going back to some of those phrases, and I'll draw something. I'll read this phrase that intrigued my mind, and then I'll ask myself, but what does that look like? And it's that creative process, trying to get the other parts of your brain to, for me, deepen it and bring it inward. Because there's so much of the stuff that I read and I'm fascinated and interested in, but then I just move on. But how do you take it in and really incorporate what it is that intrigued me? And sometimes I'll go back and go, why did I write that phrase down? I don't know, but okay. But anyway, that's one of the things I've been doing lately. I've really gotten hooked on some podcasts too. Found those to be, because I can walk and I put my earplugs in and just kind of listen to something, and find that that's really been beneficial to me. I'm not usually an oral person to hear things and learn that way. I'm more visual, but I found that to be an interesting practice as well. And something I think that's the blessing of the pandemic, right? Is that, the whole world of virtual worship and places to connect and enrich our lives has really opened up for us in the pandemic. Kirk, who has a regular morning discipline, worships every morning with the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., because that's his kind of devotional time. So I think the point of it is to say, like I do in spiritual direction, is you got to make it your own. And find out what works for you. And maybe you find that one thing that works for you, or maybe it's for a season or for a spell. But yeah, and keeping it fresh, and not just because your mother told you that this was the way to do it, or
your pastor
that is the way to do it, that it isn't necessarily what fills you now, or ever fills you. But I guess the point of all of that discussion is to encourage everybody who's listening to us at Coffee with the Pastors to ask the question about what things anchor you, and maybe to even take some time this summer to ask that question and explore some answers. Because if there was ever a time that we need to be anchored in the midst of change and where God is leading us, but to find that solid foundation and that core that will continue to be with us and hold us through, I think this is the time, right?
I mean, in a time when we still feel like there's so much that's out of our control. And I think that's always going to be a symptom of life, right? That there's always a good chunk of what we experience that is, if we're not lying to ourselves, it's honestly out of our control. And so I always kind of think, well, what can you do about that? Well, you try to shape the things that you can shape, right? And one of them is asking really good questions about what matters and what's guiding your choices and your actions right now. And it's also saying I can do some things to strengthen myself, to give myself some resilience, right, against the things I can't control in life. And certainly having a healthy spiritual practice is a piece of that. There's no doubt about it, along with being physically healthy and those kind of things, right? Those are all things we can do to kind of build up our resiliency in times when it feels like we don't have as much control as we want to. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good discussion. The one thing that I have control over is the beginning and the end of this discussion. So where it goes in the middle, we never know, but I get to welcome everybody and I get to call time. So thanks once again for Coffee with the Pastors. Thank you to Pastor Kevin and Pastor Dan for some great discussion, and blessings to all those who have tuned in. And once again, we are here for you in these changing times, and want to be a blessing to you as you are a blessing to us, and know that God blesses us through it all. So thanks again, and goodbye.
All right.